All right, guys, I'm back. Hello, guys. It's Mr. H with A-Level Tech. It has been a while, and unfortunately, this is a scenario where I have no choice. I have to reach out through the screen to talk to you guys because we are dealing with a pandemic and things don't always go as planned. But welcome back to the online channel. It's been a while. Of course, everyone is going to want me to say this, so I'll just throw it in right now. You know, if you didn't get a chance already, wherever the button may be, make sure if you do find this video interesting or hilarious or whatever you think about it, like and subscribe, comment if you want. But today we are going to have a little bit of a review on 116, which is the last portion, and we are talking about alignment angles. So the last time I was with you guys, we got to talk a little bit about a few of the terms. Of course, we have a few already on the boards. We talked about caster, camber, toe. We also mentioned a little bit about SAI, steering axis inclination. But today, here's what we're gonna do. Here's what we're gonna cover, and here's what I want you to do. So there is an assignment that is actually attached with this video. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go into the portal. So that means, yeah, you might have to minimize me for just a quick second. So just like put me over there or over there, whatever works for you if you open up a tab. But you want to get onto the portal, so the school portal, and then you're going to want to go into 116 and look under assignments. Under there, there's going to be a homework assignment that's going to go and kind of go with the title of this video. It is basically sort of an assignment you're going to work through at the same time as we're talking about some of the definition and the terms. And by the way, that's what this video is we're going to try to finish off chapter 67 by talking about a lot of the terms that are in there. This will follow up with that assignment that's in the portal, so you can do both at the same time. You can multitask. I believe in you. Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I believe in you. You guys can do it. You guys can do it. Okay, but anyhow, let's go on, get on to what we're actually going to talk about today. And what we're going to talk about is we're kind of have a refresher about some of the things we already talked about, and then we're going to add into it. So in chapter 67, I have the book right here, right below me here. So I'm going to go into a few of the other key terms we're going to talk about today. So we already talked about caster, camber, and toe, and we tried to briefly touch up on steering axis inclination both in the classroom and out in the shop. By the way, there's going to be plenty more videos coming at you guys from us actually in the shop using some of these tools and also performing them along. But for today, so angles we're going to discuss, Ackerman's angle, we kind of discussed it already. A few other ones we're going to also include is, included steering angle or angle. And we're also going to mention a little more on SAI as well as tracking, understeer and oversteer, turning radius, wheelbase. Let's see what else we have. Setback, we have scuff, we have slip angle, scrub radius, and a few others that are also mentioned in there. So I might even throw in thrust angle in there because it is kind of a big deal, especially on the newer vehicles. Like I was talking about when I had you guys in class and I was talking about the new systems where we're calibrating the cameras and the crash avoidance systems, where thrust angle is key. So I will also be talking about that. But while you are listening to me talk, you're also going to want to pay attention as I go through a key term. There's probably going to be a section in the portal where it's going to ask you, hey, what did Mr. H, what did Mr. A-Level Tech say about this? And that's when you're going to write a description. It's not just going to be, oh, I just write a vocab term. What did I specifically say about it? So that's something you're going to have to focus on, pay attention with. So bear with me. Hopefully I am bringing all the vibes to you guys as best as I can because I know that's what you guys enjoy. I know this is not the situation you were hoping for, but I'm going to try to see if I can bring some of the shop life back to you. So here we go. Just to get started, kind of a refresher. Okay, let's start off with the easy one. Let's talk about the biggest tire wearing angle, or let's just say the most aggressive tire wearing angle. And it's not like, oh my gosh, it's going to come and just, you know, punch you in the face, but the most aggressive tire wearing angle. And notice I'm saying aggressive a lot. Hint. So aggressive tire wearing angle, I talked about toe. So toe is just like if you were to look at your 2 feet, if you toe out or you toe in is negative, toe out is positive. That is the most aggressive tire wearing angle that we try to fix when it comes to vehicles that start to wear suspension components or start to sag a little over time. That's one of the biggest selling points right now in alignments is toe. You always want to make sure toe is correct because that will, let's say, wear out your tires the fastest. So we talked about toe. We also talked a little bit about, some vehicles. They mentioned in the chapter, some are with toe out, some are made for toe in. They talk about why, depending on if it's front wheel drive or rear wheel drive. There's also some other angles at work that actually will decide if the tires actually want to start to almost push out or close in. Another angle is camber. I already mentioned this for those of you who are in the camber gang, whether, I'm just kidding. Whichever it may be, we're talking about the inward or outward tilt of the tire. And for all of these, I also put the plus and minus sign so it makes it easier. So for toe out, that's going to be on the positive side. Toe in, we're going to be on the negative side. Camber, we're looking at the outward portion of the tire, so we're looking from the top of the tire down, and does it tilt in towards the vehicle or tilt out away from the vehicle, from the top of the tire? So for most of the vehicles, like I said, for everyone who slams their vehicles, we like negative camber. So tilting in towards the vehicle from the top of the tire, that is negative. Tilting out away is positive. So if you want to see positive, so for instance, right here, so I have this guy right here, so you can see that angle is pretty far out on both wheels. This would be positive. Actually, I could, yeah, that'll work. Going to the gym. Anyhow, positive camber. Now let's go for caster. What about caster? Now we're just not just talking about, the way the tire is. We're talking about the actual working, that spindle, that whole angle that we can't necessarily see. Sometimes the tire's in the way, or sometimes it's just very hard to see that imaginary line. But right here, I have sort of like a McPherson style strut drawn on the screen. Also for reference, we have, the motorcycle and also the annoying shopping cart wheel, or a caster wheel as we would call it, to kind of show you or visualize that angle for caster. So for most of the vehicles, if not all of them that are out on the road today, we like a lot of positive caster. And when I say a lot, it's not usually a lot, maybe 1 to 2 degrees, somewhere in there. Is usually the sweet spot for a lot of vehicles. I'm not saying you couldn't have less, you couldn't have more, but that's kind of the going rate. But what we like is positive caster because it actually makes the vehicle handle the road very nicely. You're almost being on top of what's already going to happen down the line. So if you were to have, let's say, negative caster like that annoying shopping cart, you're almost reacting to things that have already happened, which is not a good way to be when you are trying to control a vehicle stability-wise going down the road. You want to be proactive about it. So the outward tilt, it makes it really handle the road nicely, as well as it is very much a stable angle. So that was caster. We talked about that. Another one that we talked about, by the way, don't forget, these two you can somewhat see, you can visualize. This one not so much, depends on where it is. But moving on to SAI now. Now we're moving on to SAI. SAI is steering axis inclination. So we talked about this tilt. And that one is, we're looking side of the vehicle. So if I have the vehicle, which I've got some cooler ones to show you. Yes, I brought some toys with me. But if I were to show this one, this would be an angle like this, going this way. So I'm looking at the side of the vehicle. If I'm looking about SAI, I'm looking about front of the vehicle. Does that spindle, or is that whole strut assembly with the spindle, does that tilt in towards the inside of the car, towards the engine bay? That is SAI. So what that is there for is for handling, and it also helps the wheel recenter. So there was one tool I wanted to grab from the old shop, and I just didn't have time today, but it is a great reference guide. But SAI is basically this picture right here, so it is built into the spindle. Does it have to do with camber? No, not necessarily, because it is a molded, it's built in. It's not an angle that is, adjusted. Now, if I were to move the spindle inward or outward, would that change SAI along with camber? I mean, they can kind of go hand in hand a little bit, but camber, we're talking more about the actual wheel and tire assembly itself. For SAI, we're talking about how the actual components are built onto the knuckle, or how they attach from upper to lower ball joint, or how does this line act as far as going up for a McPherson strut, going up to the strut tower. As you turn the wheel, what that knuckle will want to do is it'll go from a neutral position. It'll actually push the tire up or the vehicle up, not the tire, but tire down, Of course, if a ground is a solid, it can't push the ground down, so what it'll do is it'll slightly raise the vehicle and want to naturally let that come back to the neutral position. So anytime you're taking that angle, and it's a built-in angle, and pretend the tire is attached to my arm right there, I were to tilt that back, it is pushing the tire down or lifting the vehicle up. So it always, so when you're turning right down here, trying to get into school, and you make your turn and you can just sort of let the wheel slide in your hands and it slowly wants to return back to center, just understand you're taking that spindle point, going straight through the tire, and you're actually making the tire almost dig down and lift the vehicle up, and what it wants to do is it wants to go back to the neutral position. It doesn't like to be there, so what it'll actually do is it'll try to rest back to where neutral is. So that's SAI. Those are just a few of the ones we talked about. Now, one that I want to get off right at the bat, which is not a vocab term, so if you're looking in the book, you might not be able to find it because this might be mentioned in a different chapter, is, and we talked about it already, it's not going to be a surprise, but we talk about, let's say, thrust angle. So thrust angle is, oh, let's see, did I erase it already? Yeah, Mr. H erased it already. But anyway, thrust angle, we're talking about the angle of the rear of the tires. So it's no surprise, we already had one of you mention in the group earlier that, you know, if you're doing an alignment, and it was that person in the back there, I still remember. If we're doing an alignment, don't a lot of alignments you start from the rear first and then work your way to the front of the vehicle? Yes you do. Because the rear of the vehicle can also add into a steering angle of the vehicle as well. Happens a lot of the times on vehicles with rigid or live axles in the rear. So, you know, if you add like a truck or something like that, where it's just a solid axle that goes out, if they are not pointed in the right direction, you can start to have what we call dog tracking or prairie dogging, where the rear of the vehicle actually likes to offset. And even though you may be able to straighten the steering wheel, the vehicle is still kind of like just going like sideways down the road. But just to show you how a thrust angle can affect a vehicle and how it can actually be the difference between a vehicle going straight or actually making a turn, I wanted to show you this. So this little device right here, this is for one of the Hunter machines. This is great because you can take the wheels and make them do all sorts of weird things. So if I wanted to go toe in, here's toe in right here. So the inward toe of the wheels, if I wanted to toe out, I could toe out just like that. But right now we're going to leave the front wheels in a neutral position. So you see I got my fancy steering wheel. Here's what we're going to do. There we go. That's true neutral. I'm going to change the thrust angle. So pretend this is a solid rear, right? Okay. Here, pretend there's an imaginary center line going straight through the front of the vehicle all the way up to ceiling for right now. Yeah, ceiling. Pretend there's an imaginary line there. Now, what happens next? Okay, let's say if that's not proper. Let's say if that imaginary line is going straight through the center of the vehicle, what if we change that? We go one way or the other. What's that going to do? What it's actually going to do is it's actually going to act as a steering angle. It's going to want to make the vehicle go left or right. It's a little confusing because sometimes you think it's the opposite of what it's going to do, but let's say if my thrust angle is left, it's going to want to make the vehicle go right. Or if my thrust angle is right, it's going to make the vehicle want to turn left. I'm going to show you how that happens. So here we go. So let's change the thrust angle of the rear of this vehicle. So if you took a look at that right there, all I did was I just offset my rear. Pretend this is a solid axle, and I offset my rear. So here's the front of the vehicle. So here's front. Here's now the rear of the vehicle. So let's take a look at what that actually looks like. So if I set that down on the ground, my wheels are going this way. Now my tracking, my straight line that was straight ahead is now going this way. So thrust angle is off. I am going to the right. The vehicle will now go left. Weird, right? It is. It is weird. But you got to think, now this is almost acting like a steering angle. So just pretend if I were to switch the steering wheels to this side, it would make sense now. Yeah, oh yeah, it would turn that way. What happened is that's on the back of the car now. So that almost wants to act like a steering angle. And the one thing that you'll see sometimes these vehicles do, you know, if we try to cheap out of an alignment, or we don't, let's say there's no way to fix this, what we can do is we can tamper with the front and kind of do one of these deals where, okay, we set the toe to where it matches the thrust angle. And yes, the vehicle now has a straight steering wheel, and you think it's going straight down the road, but it's actually doing this, where it's going down the road just sideways. So it's literally going down the road like this. And that's what I mean by when I say dog tracking or something like that. So it's very important. So that's thrust angle. So it's the imaginary line from the center point of the rear of the vehicle, and it should follow through completely down the front, straight out from the vehicle. If the thrust angle is wrong, that can change how a vehicle handles. It can make a vehicle want to constantly go left or constantly go right, just like we demonstrated right there. So here we go. Let's go the opposite way. So I'm going to turn these wheels this way now. And that's really messed up. And now what we're going to see is, now we're going to go right off the table. So here we go. Woo! Almost right off the table. So that is thrust angle. So thrust angle, think of that as the center line from the rear of the vehicle that would go straight to the front of the vehicle. That is your center line. That is your thrust angle. That's one where you got a lot of those lifted trucks, or a vehicle that's been slammed to the ground or something like that. That angle has to be adjusted, has to be made right, especially in newer vehicles with cameras that want to point straight ahead down the road, 492 feet, to see if there is something ahead of them in case there's an accident. Very hard to deal with that if a thrust angle is wrong. Okay, now we are at 16 minutes. Hopefully you're still awake. Hopefully I have your attention. And if not, wake up! That's right. Okay, so let's move on to another angle. I'm not going to make this video super, super long, but I already talked about camber, caster, toe, steering axis inclination. We talked about that a little bit. We'll also talk about the bubble gauge here in a minute, maybe, if we have time. Like I said, I don't want to make the first video too long, too overwhelming, but I did want to show you guys, I do have a couple things that I brought with me. Now, one thing I wanted to kind of talk about is the Ackerman's angle. So here's another one, the Ackerman angle. Now this is mentioned in the book. Also very similar because they did mention earlier in the steering chapters when they talked about toe out on turns. So that's just regular toe out right up here. But toe out on turns, we talked about this in the shop where, the inside wheel has to be at a steeper angle than the outside wheel because both wheels cannot travel the same distance. We will scrub tires. So does that hold true for everything? Not necessarily. So just for your amusement, let's say if I did have a 1 to 18 scale GT500, if I just were to have one of those, if I were to flip that upside down, I mean, yeah, it's a pretty good model of it. Shelled out a few bucks for it. I have so many. But if I were talking about toe out on turns and stuff, is the Ackerman angle built into this model car? Probably not. Probably not. But does a model car like this, is this going to go over the course of like thousands and thousands of miles? No. So if I were to put this onto, let's say the ground, which, yeah, we can see this is on pavement. But if I was going down on the ground, let's say I turn the wheels, this way or that way, or whichever way it might be, am I going to start scrubbing tires? I will never notice I'm scrubbing tires on there. But let's say, if I were talking about, let's say, thrust angle on a vehicle with a live axle. So let's talk about, maybe even if I had a Grand National out of the One Fast and Furious movie. Yeah, there we go. So if I had that and I had a live rear, let's say if that was offset a little bit and my thrust angle was wrong, would that mean this car would dog track down the road this way? You're absolutely right. WD-40 should fix that. But anyhow, I thought it'd be just a little silly. But if I had any of those, just one thing to remember about toe out on turns or the Ackerman angle, it is so we don't scrub tires. Because remember, toe being what? The most aggressive tire wearing angle. I am never going just in a straight line forever. If I have run over somebody, gone through something solid, like a building, or gone off a cliff, or probably run over quite a few people, and then come to a halt somehow, some way. But I've got to make turns. So toe out on turns, it's very important that I turn that inner tire at a steeper angle than the outward tire, so I'm not scrubbing the tires, because that will, in no time flat, wear out the tread on the tire. Now, with the Ackerman angle, how is that built in? That is built into the steering knuckle. Where is the Ackerman angle built into? It's a steering knuckle. So if I were to go into the book and I was going into chapter 68. So I went to maybe, yeah, I think they mentioned it in the last couple of pages here, and they do. And that's when they talk about oversteer and understeer, and that's what we'll finish up for today. But let's say the Ackerman angle, what you'll see is that's actually built into the spindle as well as part of the outer tie rods in some cases as well. But you'll see that's why that angle is there. They do a nice job in figure 6718 showing you the Ackerman angle. Do they show you in any of these cool, gadgets here? I mean, they kind of can, but it doesn't quite act the same. So if I were to look for the Ackerman angle in, let's say, suspension to which, this would be sort of my steering linkage, my parallelogram steering linkage. My Ackerman angle would be built into the knuckle right here, or my spindle, if you would prefer to call it that. And then maybe into a little bit of the outer tie rod end for clearance. But it's built into the knuckle, is where the Ackerman angle is located. The steering knuckle. Okay, now, last up on this video, I want to talk just a little bit about oversteer and understeer. So, oversteer and understeer, a quick way to remember it, and this is the absolute last part of chapter 67. Understeer and oversteer. Okay, so understeer is when you have a desired path and you just completely overshoot it, which was the case in, a lot of cars. If you lock up the brakes or something, you're trying to make a turn, usually you shoot past it, so that would be a form of oversteer. So they do a nice job in the book. So just so I show you in the book, if anyone's getting confused by what I'm saying, so here's, understeer and oversteer. So understeer, it's exactly how it sounds. I steered, but it understeered, and I went way past where my angle line would be. So the blue car is where the car actually ended up. The other gray car is the designated path. So, show you in very easy terms here. So let's say this GT500 is leaving the car meet, right? And he's going to do a really heavy burnout. And let's say, crowd's over there. Okay, so he's going, okay, he's lighting them up, he's getting a little squirrely, and no, he doesn't run into a crowd. No violence. So, he doesn't run into the crowd, but he decides, hey, I need to make a turn. And so he accelerates and he goes a little too fast, and he wants to make this turn right here, but he ends up just overshooting the turn and then smacking into, a stop sign or something like that. Okay, there we go. Understeer. Okay, so oversteer. So in the book, oversteer, what they're showing you is, the desired path, but you just completely spin out is pretty much what you do. So you can see the blue car right there. He was going for this, but he just completely spun out. So oversteer usually happens a lot of the time in cars when, sometimes we can call it, snap oversteer, if you're trying to compensate and turn one way and it'll snap it the other way. First generation MR2 owners, you know what I'm talking about. But we're talking about oversteer. So oversteer, let's say, hey, I was trying to make this turn, into McDonald's, but I was going too fast, and what ended up happening was the back end just slid out right from underneath me, and I just pretty much skid out is pretty much what I did. So I just pretty much just let the back of the car just come around me because I wasn't able to accomplish the turn. That's a little bit into oversteer. Now, plenty more I want to cover. We will cover more in the shop. So the videos to come, we will not be in the classroom, but we're actually going to take all of this stuff, including the 2 car models, which I'm just throwing in there. We're going to take that out to the shop. But of all the definitions I mentioned, make sure you're paying attention. Make sure you look in the portal, because there was, for each one of those vocab terms, a part where you're supposed to fill out, what did Mr. H say about that? What did Mr. A-level tech say about that key term? So those are just a few of the key terms. We will have more information in the chapter. We're going to also have more videos. One being, this is the first one. So like I said, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you do hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, because if you didn't, what are you doing with your life? I mean, I don't know what to even add with that. I mean, there's no follow-up question. But anyway, I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.